you doing? This is Sean McVay with Sean's Outdoor Adventures. I usually run archery and hunting videos on this channel. However, I do some home improvement projects, and I have a pretty big background in environmental stuff. So I have an environmental degree from Penn State. Used to run my own mold remediation company and mold testing company. Sold that because I didn't want to kill myself with the health issues. But I do have a lot of knowledge in the field. I have a very successful video that deals with basement mold and finishing a basement and try to avoid having mold in that project. I'll put a link for that if you're interested in that. In this video, however, I'm going to talk about how to clean attic mold. I'm also going to talk about how mold ends up in your attic and what causes that, things you can do to help lower the chances of that happening. I'm going to start off with just the cleaning because I'm titling this video How to Clean Attic Mold, so some people might be watching it just for that. So I'll talk about that quickly here, and then I'll talk about how mold gets in your attic. So when I did mold remediation, the standard protocol traditionally was physical removal of mold, which would mean using sanders and scrub brushes and physically scrubbing the mold off of the wood using HEPA filters. So what you're doing is when you're scrubbing, you're putting all those mold spores airborne, and we would use HEPA filters, so they would suck the spores in there and get it all out of the air. So if you're someone who has a home and you're trying to figure out how do I get rid of the mold in the attic, you could do that and rent all the equipment to do that, but renting the stuff is going to start increasing the price. Over time, when I did mold remediation, a product came out that was honestly phenomenal, and it's basically a heavy-duty bleach with an accelerator in it. So what you would do is spray this bleach stuff onto the mold, and it would dissolve it. I mean, it would penetrate right into the wood. And it really, to me, I think is the best overall product because you didn't have to put all those mold spores airborne and trying to scrub it off. Now, I'm going to put a link to this stuff. When it first came out, it was called MMR Mold Stain Remover. They've now made this product available to even the public. You used to have to be a contractor to get it. Now you can even buy it on Amazon. I will put a link for it. Here's what you do basically for applying it. I would use the hazmat suits, when I did mold remediation and the face mask. You want coverage over your whole body. So like long sleeves. I would get those rubber gloves that come up your arm here, and even duct tape them to your sleeves so that there's nothing's getting down in there. I would also buy one of those face masks with the correct respirating filters on there. I'll put links for all that. Now the respirator itself, the face respirator, is going to run you in the ballpark of $130 or so, $100 to $130 for the mask, and then the filters, you're looking at another 15 or so for that. It is worth it though if you are going to do this yourself. Between the face mask, the rubber gloves, and the mold stain remover, you're still under, or you're right around, a couple hundred, maybe $200. To hire someone to come in and do this, you're looking at thousands. So this video, what I'm sharing with you right here, probably just saved you a couple $1,000s. And if you're trying to sell your home or you're getting ready to sell your home, you don't want a bunch of mold in the attic because it's going to lower the value of your home by tens of thousands maybe. So here's what you do. One other thing you're going to need if you don't already have is a pump sprayer. You put the mold stain remover in a pump sprayer, you pump it up, and then you spray it with the nozzle. And with that, you can get it out away from you and spray it. So basically what you'll do, you want to put your mask on, you want your gloves and everything on. Follow the instructions that they give you for it. If they've changed the instructions a little bit, just follow the instructions from the manufacturer. So if you're working in an attic, very often in an attic, you have those joists and an insulation between it, and you could step from one joist to another. One thing I used to do in the business though is I get like a 12 by 2 by 12 and maybe like 6 feet long or so, because sometimes you have to work them up into an attic, so you only have a little space to get it up. So 4 feet long to 6 feet long, I'd put 2 of them up there and I'd lay them over the joists. And so I'd walk across the one and I'd drag the next one up and put it out in front of me. And I would stand on those while spraying. It just makes it a little bit easier. So all you do with the mold stain remover is you put it in your pump sprayer and you spray it on the mold. In most situations, it just dissolves it. If you have plywood or particle board as the sheeting for the ceiling part of your attic, that it works so well on that. Here are some before and after pictures of when I was in the business. I'd go into an attic and there would be all mold and stuff. I'd spray it with this mold stain remover and it would just dissolve it. So you're going to want to calculate out how many square feet of moldy area you have, and then how much, look for the manufacturer's recommendations, how many square feet 1 gallon will treat, and then you can calculate how many gallons you'll need. Okay, so I just wanted to share a little bit of how to get rid of the mold if you have it, for those of you who just care about that. If you want to learn now how that mold gets there, what to do about the soffit venting and other kinds of venting, I'm going to get into that now. So I have my little board here. I'm an educator, so I had to put this in here. I also have a Catholic YouTube channel. I can put a link for that if you ever want to learn about the Catholic Church. Check out my McVeigh Ministries YouTube channel. But for now, let's talk about mold and how it gets into the attic. So first, what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw. Now this is the ground. This is actually going to be your basement. Let's say you have a 2-story home. I'm not much of an artist, but you'll get the picture here. Let's put a couple windows in here, just for fun. So you got a couple windows upstairs, a couple windows down here. Here's your front door with your doorknob. Okay, and remember, this is the ground. This is outside. So now this is your basement. I'll put a B for basement. All right, so when I was in the mold business, I got called to a job. This guy had an enormous basement and a crawl space. He had both. And there was water in the basement and the crawl space. And he had mold everywhere. And then I turned to the guy and I said, well, how bad's the attic? He's like, what do you mean? I said, with the way it looks down here, your attic's probably equally as bad. We went up into the attic and there was mold. Every square inch of that attic was mold. So here's how I knew he had attic mold and how this problem happens. So first of all, he had all this moisture in the basement. And what you've done is you've created a system here. You're closed off. Now, moisture that comes out of the ground just goes up into the atmosphere. Here, we are creating a box with temperature differences, which really changes everything here. So moisture naturally comes into the basement from the ground. So it's coming in. And most people run dehumidifiers. If you have air-conditioned basement, if you have a finished basement and it's air-conditioned, that helps as well. But typically what you have is moisture's coming into the basement. Let's say you have a basement waterproofing system with a sump pump pit. So let's say there's a sump pit here. Let me just give you an example for a moment. I went in a house one time, there was a sump pump pit, and there was no cover on it, so you could see the water in there. And there was no dehumidifier running in the basement. The room directly above where the sump pump pit, there was mold all over the ceiling. So I went into the home, they said, why is there mold all in the ceiling of this room here? I said, let's go in the basement. So there's all this moisture here, and it's coming up. The moisture is coming up, okay? So what you have is increased moisture in this living space. Now, when you get into the attic, especially in your northern regions, I grew up in Pennsylvania, I now live in Iowa, these are prone to this. So moisture's in here, and what you have in the attic, even if, let's say your insulation's here, even with insulation, you're still going to have a massive temperature gradient right on the inside of the sheeting in the attic. And so what happens there on that temperature gradient, you have increased humidity and temperature here. The higher the temperature, the more moisture the air can hold. So you have all this moisture in the air. When the temperature drops, the moisture condenses out of the air. Think of the summertime with a glass of ice water. in that ice water, or excuse me, on the glass of ice water, there is condensation all around the outside because the temperature is quickly dropping right around that glass, and that moisture is condensing out of the air. So in the attic space, what you have is this massive temperature gradient right here, and when that air gets close to that, the moisture, the temperature starts to drop and the moisture comes out. So now what you've done is you've created the environment that mold needs to grow. Mold needs moisture and food. That's all they need, moisture and food. So here you've created the moisture. The food is organic material. God created mold to break down wood when a tree would fall to bring it back to the earth to provide nutrients to the ground. So there was a natural reason for it. But in this space, in this situation, we don't want mold. So we've given it what it needs to grow. It's going to grow. There are mold spores in the air everywhere, even in this room where I'm standing in, even in Antarctica. There are mold spores in the air. There are mold spores in the air everywhere in the entire world. And all it needs is for that mold spore to land on that surface, then it can begin to grow. So now, what do? One thing we can do is dehumidify the house. Even in the wintertime, you got to make sure your humidity levels are kept low. Some of you may notice that you get lots of condensation on your windows in the wintertime. That probably is an indication, one, your windows may be a little too drafty, but if they're not, maybe they're new windows and you're still getting it along the bottom, what that's really indicating is your humidity level is still too high in the house. When you hit that temperature gradient on the window, that moisture is condensing out, and then you're probably going to get little bits of mold growth along your windowsill. What do you do there? Again, if you can lower the humidity level, that's going to help a lot. Even in the wintertime, making sure the humidity is kept down in the basement is going to help you. Now let's talk a little bit about the attic for a second. I'm just going to alter my drawing here. Most, your construction is going to have, there's going to be an overhang and soffit here. So what most homes do now in the way they're built is there's soffit venting underneath this overhang and then a ridge vent. And most codes now require a ridge vent. The intention there is that your attic is going to heat up during the day when the sun hits the roof. It's going to cause the temperature to heat up in here, and hot air rises. So it's going to create this draw up, and you need air to come in to replace the hot air that's being drawn out. So it's supposed to create this flow of air. My marker seems to be dying here. I apologize. Supposed to create a flow of air out the top. Now, when I was in the mold business, even with good venting, and you also, by the way, have to make sure your insulation isn't blocking these vents. There should be little spacers that are built in that keep the insulation away. However, sometimes the insulation gets over that. And also you could have a temperature gradient right in here where the insulation is getting pushed down, and you could have mold growth there. But anyway, that's the intention of it. But I did so many attic jobs where they had this venting. It seemed to work, but it just wasn't enough. Now, some people put vents in the end of on the either end of the attic space, and to try to draw air in that way. Now, I've actually, back when I did the mold business, I've seen videos, and there's a lot of people who have videos out there who actually don't know what they're talking about. But there was one guy that said that these end vents kill the whole system because air comes in and just circulates around and it prevents the airflow up. That was actually incorrect. I'd seen more attics that were successful in keeping mold out that had both in play, and so so I didn't agree with that guy. However, I saw both that had failings and both that had successes. One of the key things also in the whole thing is which way does the roof face, because if both sides don't get the same amount of sunlight and heating throughout the day, there tended to be mold growth on one side and not the other because of the temperature variances that were taking place regardless of venting. Some of the most successful attics that I saw, even in your new construction, had a fan, one of these exhaust fans that you put on the side of the house that kicks on when the temperature gets too high. If you could run it on a hemostat, that would be great too, to get it to kick on in certain situations. but that would really draw the air out and make sure that, you know, the temperatures were being more consistent in the attic space. The best thing you could do if you're building a home or you're preparing to, as far as insulating an attic, spray foam insulation is your best bet. It's going to be the most expensive, but when you spray that foam insulation right on the sheeting, it helps to prevent that temperature gradient from taking place on the wood. And so, in my opinion, if I was building and I could afford it, I'd get spray foam insulation on here. Let's talk a little bit about insulation down here while we're in this area of the house. So I've been in houses when I did the mold work where mostly in ranch style homes you'd see this. So let's draw a ranch house. So it's like this, and then you have, you know, your roof is like that. Right there in the living room of this house, you could see where all the joists were in the ceiling. There was like this black mark in the paint all the way down, and the homeowners are like, why is this happening? What was happening in that situation was in the attic you have the joists running this way with insulation between each joist. And because the insulation didn't come above where the joist was, there was actually the cold air up here was also causing a little bit of cold, and maybe there was a little bit of an air gap right around some of the joists, but there was a temperature drop right here, even on the surface there. And so in the living space, because of that temperature drop, it was causing, it wasn't mold that was growing on the living space side, but that temperature difference was causing discoloration with whatever kind of paint they had. And so what they needed to do is get another layer of insulation and roll it out this way, perpendicular to those joists, so that you didn't have a temperature gradient right around each joist. So that was that scenario. I'm just throwing that in there in case any of you are experiencing that. You're like, why is this happening? Maybe that's something you're going to have to look into, is get some insulation to roll out there. And some other things that can cause attic mold, you could have mold in a specific area. I remember one home I went into, they had a bathroom right here, and they had it vented out here, and I think the venting just was trying to go out this here. So they just had a pipe that ended right there, and there was mold all in here because you have that hot, humid air getting piped out right there. This wasn't a good situation. You really ideally want it vented out here, or some people come out the side here, like off the sidewall and out. But you want to get that out of there. I was even in a new construction home once that had washer and dryer in the basement, and the builder vented the dryer into the attic, and you're pumping all that hot, humid air into the attic. It just was, he had mold everywhere. It was a mess. So he had to sue the builder. So these are types of things that could also be contributing to that. So look at where things are vented. Make sure they're vented out of the living space properly. And lastly, a lot of people who have forced hot air heating, they have humidifiers that they put in these systems now. Those are actually a very bad idea because you have all this increased humidity that you're pumping through the house, and it's all going to go up into the attic. Most people that run humidifiers have a very high likelihood of attic mold because of it. You know, unless you have the spray foam insulation, that's going to help, and then also proper venting with all that. But even still, with the temperature gradients that you get in the cold regions in the wintertime, you're basically, you know, shooting yourself in the foot because you're going to have all that moisture up in there, and that's how it's happening. You know, those of you who humidify your house, you're going to have to back off of that if you want to prevent mold from happening. If you want to do a periodic maintenance every couple years, just get up in there with the mold stain remover and spray it and just kill it off. You can do that too. It's going to come back if you don't solve the issues down here, if you don't reduce the amount of humidity that's being created down here. So I hope that helps. Again, remember, hot air can hold a lot more moisture. So once it comes out here, let's say it's 80 degrees just hypothetically here, and it's 20 degrees up here. That's just that temperature plummets. All that moisture comes out of the air once it gets up into there, and you got mold. Thank you so much for tuning in. Again, if you want to check out my video on how to finish a basement and avoid getting mold, I'll put a link for that. If I do another video just on how to deal with mold in the basement, maybe I will if there's enough demand. I can talk more about that just in itself. Just now, you've got a basement and mold, what do I do? Comment below if that's information you're interested in. Again, if you're interested in my Catholic information, I'll put a link for my Catholic channel. And you're already on, this is my Sean's Outdoor Adventures channel. So if you want to see any archery or hunting related videos, make sure you check that out because I've got a lot of deer, a lot of experience. I'll just give you a little look at this over here. So there you have it, folks. Thanks so much for tuning in. Until next time, take care and God bless.